The girl's name was Mabel Decker, and she hadn't seen 17 summers. Her face was all angles, cheekbones sharp, eyes too wide for her age, skin pale from too many hungry winters. She lived in a splintered shack down by the river, the kind of place the preacher never visited and the law forgot long ago. Her mother died the slow way, lungs full of blood, prayers unanswered. Her father died a different death, one shot of whiskey at a time. It was the kind of night where the wind scraped down chimneys and dogs howled for no reason. Mabel sat on the stoop, clutching a chipped tin cup of warm water, when she heard boots dragging through mud. Her father, he stumbled up the steps, face swollen, ribs cracked. 2 men followed him inside, tall, dead-eyed creatures in oilskin coats and mud-caked boots. "I need the loan," her father slurred. The taller thug, knife scar down one cheek, tossed a glance at Mabel. "She's clean?" he asked. The father didn't look at her, just nodded. She stared at him, that worthless man she once called Daddy, and he couldn't meet her eyes. The thug smiled. It didn't touch his eyes. They set their whiskey down on the table like they owned the place. And just like that, Mabel Decker became payment. A girl traded for a stack of coins and a promise of silence. By dawn, word had slithered through Caleb's Bluff like oil on water. He gave the girl for debt. No preacher, no papers, just handed her over. The town shrugged. Some whispered. Most turned away. The sheriff stayed locked in his office with a bottle and a hangover. When asked, he muttered, "It ain't my place." The banker, slick-haired and slicker-hearted, just chuckled. A man pays his debts however he must. And nobody expected Rory Vexler to step forward. Rory Vexler was a name folks used in curses and cautionary tales. A man who lived alone on a patch of hard land carved out of the hills like a scar. They said his wife had run off or was buried behind his barn, that he kept skulls of coyotes nailed to his fence posts, that he shot trespassers and buried their boots as warning. He only came into town once a season, to collect salt and seed and ignore everyone who dared look his way. He never smiled, never talked. He smelled of iron and smoke. Children crossed the street when he passed. So when the saloon doors creaked open that morning and Rory Vexler stepped in, hat low, coat dusted with frost, rifle slung across his back, every voice went still. The girl was there, sitting on a stool, hands in her lap. Her cheek was bruised, and her shoes didn't match. The thugs were there too, laughing over a bottle, waiting for the clock to strike noon. Rory didn't even pause. He walked right up to them like death, with a steady gait. "I'll pay the debt," he said. Even the piano player froze. The thug with the scar looked him over. "You thought you were broke." Rory didn't blink. "I got cattle. Too strong. Branded and clean." The thug scoffed. "Girl's worth more than that. She's worth more than you. But I'm the only one offering." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. The men looked at each other, then at Mabel, then at Rory. Hard eyes, cracked knuckles, the kind of man who didn't bluff. "Fine," the scarred one said. "You want her. She's yours. Debt's cleared." They stood up, smirking. They'd gotten what they came for. Humiliation. They thought they'd watch Rory Vexler walk off with a piece of property, like he was desperate. But he didn't touch the girl, didn't look at her like that. He just turned to her, voice low. "Get your coat." She blinked. "I ain't got one." He took his off, long, wool-lined, and draped it over her shoulders. "Then come on." They walked out together. Nobody stopped them. Nobody dared. Behind them, the saloon filled again with murmurs and disbelief. The sheriff peeked out his window, but said nothing. Some folks claimed it was a trick, a setup, that Vexler would disappear into the hills with the girl and never be seen again. Others said maybe, just maybe, the man still had a soul. Mabel didn't look back once. Out beyond the last fence post, the river ran quiet and cold, and the wind carried the first flakes of winter over the hills to a shack no one visited and a girl no one had saved until now. They rode out of town with the wind at their backs and judgment on every porch. The geldings' hooves thudded against frostbitten earth, but Rory didn't rush. He rode quiet, one hand on the reins, the other steady at his side. Mabel sat behind him, clinging to the saddle horn, her chin just above his shoulder. She hadn't said a word since they left the saloon, and Rory hadn't asked for any. The silence was cold but not cruel. The hills swallowed them within the hour, miles of yellow grass, black trees, and crumbling fences that led to nowhere good. Fog rolled in like old breath, soft and thick, curling between rocks and branches. It was a silence the town folk feared, the kind of silence where men disappeared and no one asked why. But Mabel didn't fear it. Not yet. She was too busy trying to understand the man in front of her. When they reached his land, the sun was dragging its last red light across the edge of the world. His place wasn't a ranch so much as a stubborn claim. The house leaned like an old drunk, patched with boards from different trees. A rusted windmill spun slow above a dry well. Chickens scratched near the door. The barn looked half-burned. Still, it was the first place in years that hadn't reeked of liquor or lies. Rory dismounted and held out a hand. Mabel slid off stiffly, her legs nearly buckled. He steadied her with one hand on her elbow. This way. The inside of the house smelled like smoke in winter. A cast-iron stove hissed in the corner. One table, two chairs. A wall of books, worn, dog-eared, and dusty. A sewing kit sat on the shelf next to a locked box. Her eyes drifted to the far wall. A painting, a woman, young, black-haired, with a half-smile painted by someone who missed her. Rory noticed. That was my wife. Mabel swallowed. She's pretty. He didn't respond. Just went to the stove, tossed in 2 more logs, and stoked the fire. There's a basin in the back. Water's cold. You need it. You use it. Ain't much, but it's yours. He pointed to a small room off the back. A cot, a blanket, a door that latched from the inside. She stood there, coat still wrapped around her shoulders. You hungry? She nodded. He heated up a pot of stew, thick with beans and leftover meat, poured her a mug of water. When she sat, she half expected him to watch her like the others had. But he turned away, lit a lantern, stared out the window like he'd forgotten how company worked. That night, he didn't lock the doors, didn't touch her, didn't even say goodnight. He went out to the barn and didn't return. She lay in the cot, wide awake, heart thudding like hooves in her throat. And for the first time in weeks, she wasn't scared of what might happen. She was scared of why it didn't. Days passed slow as molasses. Rory woke early, before the sun cracked open, worked the fence, hauled feed, repaired the barn roof. Mabel tried to help, carrying water, feeding chickens, scrubbing old rust-off tools. He didn't thank her, but he didn't stop her either. Every night, she'd wait to hear his boots at the door. They never came. He slept in the barn. Always. The 5th morning, she stepped out to find him chopping wood, shirt soaked with sweat despite the cold. You don't trust me, she said, arms crossed. He paused, axe midair. Ain't about trust. Then what is it? He drove the axe down. Thunk. I know what it feels like to be used, he said flatly. Figured the least I can do is not make you feel it again. She blinked, caught off guard. You think I've been used? He looked her dead in the eyes. I think the world tried to trade you like a chipped coin. That don't mean I have to do the same. After that, she started talking more. Told him about her mother, about how she used to sing while combing Mabel's hair, about the summer they had a peach tree, and how it died the same year her daddy started gambling. She told him how no one ever asked her what she wanted, just handed her off like she was a sack of meal. He listened, didn't interrupt, didn't preach. And then, one night over beans and silence, she asked, "Why'd your wife leave?" She didn't. Die. He nodded. Buried her. He nodded again. She was quiet for a while. Then, was she kind? She was, he said, but not soft. Mabel smiled. Sounds like someone I'd like. She would have liked you, he said. Winter came hard and sudden. Wind howled through the gaps in the walls. Snow drifted into the barn. Pipes froze. They moved the cot to the main room, closer to the fire. Still, Rory slept on the floor. "You're gonna freeze," she told him. "I'm used to it," he said. But his cough grew worse. So she left the cot empty one night, lay down beside him on the floor. He didn't move, didn't touch her, just whispered, "Thank you." The next day, the men came, 3 of them. Riders in dark coats, eyes like iron nails. The same ones who'd tried to take her before. They said the debt wasn't settled, that Vexler's cattle were thin, that a girl was worth more than 2 starved cows. They said she belonged to them. Rory stood on the porch, shotgun in hand, his shadow long in the snow. "She belongs to no one," he said. One man spat. "You won't live long enough to prove it." Rory didn't blink. "Try me." They left, but not before cutting the reins on his gelding and shooting his weather vane. Cowards. When they were gone, Mabel walked up behind him. "You ain't scared?" He stared at the tree line. "Used to be." She waited. "And now?" He turned. "I've got something worth protecting." Winter deepens. The world narrows to survival. But inside the hollow, 2 lost souls learn to live again. The wind didn't howl up here like it did in town. It breathed, low and steady, like a tired animal curled beneath the hills. Mabel settled into the rhythm of Rory's world like a stray dog might settle into kindness, not trusting it, not understanding it, but drawn to its warmth. The first 2 weeks passed like thawing ice, slow, then faster. She rose at dawn, fed the goats, swept the porch, washed her hair in cold water from the pump, and used the lye soap he made himself. Rory didn't hover. He showed her once how to patch a fence, once how to rub oil into the hinges so the gate wouldn't scream, once how to tell when a hen was egg-bound, and then he let her be. It was the strangest sort of safety she'd ever known. On her second day, she wandered out back and saw the cottonwood tree. Its bark was gray and peeling. Beneath it, a wooden cross had weathered almost to nothing. She stood there a long time. Was she beautiful? She asked that night over stew. Rory stared into the flames. She was kind, he said. That was enough. He never raised his voice. He never raised his hand. He never raised his eyes to her when she undressed behind the curtain he strung across her corner of the cabin. And every night, he laid his bedroll down in the barn, even when it snowed. When she asked him why, he said, "I snore. Goats don't complain." But she knew that wasn't it. The 3rd week, she brought him coffee in the barn. He was mending an old bridle by lamplight, hands steady despite the cold. She sat across from him on an overturned bucket. "Why did you do it?" she asked quietly. He didn't look up, just kept threading the leather. "Because I saw my own daughter in your face." Her breath caught. "You have a daughter?" "Had." And that was all he said. She didn't push. Something about his voice told her the rest was buried with that woman under the tree. But after that night, he started eating indoors again. And once, just once, he laughed when she fell trying to carry a bale of hay and landed square on her behind. It was a short sound, rusted, like a gate that hadn't swung in years. But it was real, and she never forgot it. The storms came hard in February. Sleet turned the yard to glass. Trees snapped under the weight. The chickens huddled in silence. One night, The wind pushed in through a crack in the wall, and the fire nearly went out. Mabel woke cold. She wrapped a blanket around herself and cracked the door to the barn. Rory was awake, sitting against the hay bales, rifle across his knees. He turned slowly when he saw her. "Something wrong?" She shook her head. "Can't sleep." He nodded. "Me neither." She didn't go to him, but she didn't close the door all the way either. Come March, the world began to thaw. So did she. She talked more. About her mother, who used to dance barefoot in the rain. About a book she once read, torn in half, that ended in the middle of a sentence. About how she once thought marriage was something beautiful. Rory didn't talk much in return, but he listened with the weight of a man who'd lost more than he ever said, and that meant more to her than any clever word. Then one morning, she stepped outside to check the coop. The sky was pale blue, the wind gentle, and hoofprints crisscrossed the yard. Fresh, big, too many. She ran back to the house, heart hammering. "Rory!" she yelled. He was already on the porch, rifle in hand. "They've been here," she said, breathless. He nodded. "I saw." They didn't speak again until nightfall. He stoked the fire, sharpened his knife, loaded every chamber of his shotgun slow and careful. Then finally, "They won't ask next time. They'll come to take." She looked at him. "What'll we do?" He glanced at her, just once. "Whatever we must." That night, she didn't sleep in her cot. She laid her blanket next to his, by the fire. He didn't speak, didn't move, but just before sleep took her, she felt his hand settle beside hers. Not touching, just there, like an anchor in a rising tide. Epilogue. The hollow holds its own. The men returned days later, guns on hips, cold in their eyes. But they didn't know that Rory had been a sniper during the war, that the girl they thought was helpless had spent every night sharpening fence spikes and boiling oil. They didn't know what it meant to fight for peace. So when they tried to breach the fence, the land answered, and they left with fewer bullets than they came with, and bruises where pride used to be. Spring came hard that year, green and defiant. The first flowers bloomed by the cottonwood. Mabel planted seeds, beans, corn, squash, and sang low while she worked. Rory fixed the front steps, started shaving again. She caught him reading once, glasses perched on the tip of his nose. He looked up, surprised. "You read," she teased. He smirked. "A little." She leaned against the doorframe. "Teach me." He nodded once, and every night after supper he did. One day, she turned to him and said, "I never thought I'd be safe again." "You are," he said. "You sure?" He met her eyes, not from pain, not from sorrow, but from being owned. She looked at him a long time, and then she kissed his cheek. They never had a wedding. No preacher, no dress, just two chairs pulled close one night by the fire, two hands clasped together, and the kind of silence that feels like a vow. When the storm came, it didn't just carry rain, it carried reckoning. The air smelled of iron that night. Not blood, not yet, but something close. The sky bruised deep gray. Thunder rolled slow and deep like the growl of an old god waking. Wind ripped through the cottonwood outside the cabin, bending it nearly to its roots. Mabel stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself. Something was coming. She knew it. Rory knew it too. He didn't say a word, just sat on the porch sharpening his knife. One hand steady, the other still bandaged from the last frostbite. His shotgun leaned against the rail. They waited in silence. And then the sound. Hoofbeats. Not one horse. 4, maybe 5. Out of the storm they came. Dark shapes on horseback. Coats flapping like carrion wings. Faces hidden under soaked hats. But the eyes were there. Cold. Familiar. Full of unfinished business. Same men who tried to buy her. Same men who thought 2 cattle was too low a price for a girl's soul. They stopped just beyond the fence line, rain slapping the brim of their hats. Rory didn't rise. He didn't need to. The tallest dismounted, a scar still twisted down the side of his cheek. "You break our deal, Vexler," he said. "We came for what's owed." "She ain't a debt," Rory said, voice even. "She was a trade. Her old man gave her up, and your cows didn't cover it." Rory stood, took one step forward. "She stays." The second man spat into the mud. "You can't hide forever." "I ain't hiding," Rory said. He bent, lifted the shotgun slowly. "But you're welcome to try and take her." Scarface shifted in his saddle. "You pull that trigger, you sign your death." "You take one more step," Rory said coldly, "and God himself won't find what's left of you." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain. Then, slowly, they backed their horses up. "You'll regret this," Scarface said. "We'll be back." Rory didn't blink. "Bring more men." They turned, but not before one of them tossed something into the barn window. A bottle, a rag, a flame, and then the sky lit up. The barn caught fire like paper. Flames climbed the hayloft rafters in seconds. Mabel screamed. Rory dropped the shotgun and ran. Bare hands, no coat. The heat hit them like a furnace. The horses in the corral shrieked and kicked. The chickens scattered in a frenzy. He kicked the barn door in. Smoke poured out like a lung bursting. "No, Rory," she cried. But he was already inside. She followed, tore her dress to wet it in the rain and cover her mouth. Found him dragging hay bales out, coughing, stumbling. Together, they hauled what they could. Buckets of water, blankets, anything. He wrapped his arms around the mule and drove it into the yard, soot blackening his face. She used her apron to slap out sparks catching on the straw. It took hours, and by the time the last flame hissed out, Rory was on his knees, shaking, palms raw and blistered. She sat beside him in the ash, hands around his, whispering something like a prayer. Dawn broke slow and ugly. The barn was half gone, the corral scorched. Smoke curled off every beam, like it was still deciding whether to live or die. Rory sat on the porch, coat draped around his shoulders, hands bandaged in scraps. Mabel came out with 2 cups of coffee, steaming and bitter. He took one, sipped in silence. "You can leave," he said finally. She looked at him. "You're free. Always were. I never expected you to stay." Mabel stared out at the burnt barn. She thought of her old house by the river. The stink of cheap whiskey, the yelling, the hands too quick to slap. She thought of the town, with its blind lawmen and drunk preachers. She thought of this man beside her, quiet, blistered, broken in places, but never once had he asked for anything but her peace. She turned to him. Her voice was steady now. "I'm already home." He didn't smile, but his eyes did something close to soft. He nodded once, took another sip, then she reached out and took his hand, not as a debt, not as a deal, but as a choice. Epilogue. After the fire. Word reached town a week later. A barn had burned. Men had come, but Rory Vexler was still standing. Folks talked. They said the girl never left. They said she planted flowers by the cottonwood and named the chickens after queens. They said the barn got rebuilt, better, stronger. They said she married him. No preacher, no guests, just 2 chairs, 2 hands, and a vow made without words. People still avoided Vexler when he came to town, but some tipped their hats to the girl beside him. Because even in a place like Caleb's Bluff, where justice was rusted and women were weighed like cattle, there was something undeniable about a girl who chose to stay, and a man who knew how to let her.